The first assault capsule ripped through the station's exterior like a blade through silk, hurling superheated fragments across the peacekeeping corridor. Air shrieked outward into nothingness. Power systems failed. Before the emergency seals could activate, the capsule burst apart. Scarvan warriors flooded through. Standing 2.8 meters tall, pure scaled power wrapped in natural armor. Reptilian skulls swiveling methodically. Amber eyes locking onto prey. Their pulse weapons released devastating bursts, concentrated energy that reduced station guards to vapor and scattered remains. Additional capsules struck. First dozens, then hundreds more. The orbital hub trembled from the onslaught. Emergency lighting stuttered. The station's millennium-old framework groaned as precisely placed explosives detonated along critical junctions, severing main power lines and transmission nodes in calculated succession. Inside the assembly hall, representatives from 37 civilizations sat paralyzed in their chambers. Envoys, mediators, spokespeople for societies that had maintained harmony for over 4,000 years. They'd been discussing commercial agreements when the first detonation shook the station. Now they witnessed the primary entrance buckling inward. Envoy Kale of the Avian rose from his position, his feathered crown pressed flat against his head, a primal fear response his people never fully evolved past. Around him, fellow envoys scrambled toward exits that no longer functioned. Some summoned protection forces that would never arrive. Others simply froze, unable to comprehend the catastrophe unfolding. The entrance exploded. Scarvan soldiers surged into the hall, their thunderous steps rattling the ancient flooring. They deployed in military precision, weapons leveled and commenced firing. No ultimatums, no alerts, no dialogue, just systematic extermination. The Feloran envoy absorbed 3 energy pulses to the torso before rising from his seat. The breath contingent, all 4 members, perished in formation near the Eastern Passage, eliminated while attempting escape. The Omuran delegate, a species celebrated for their philosophy of nonviolence, merely closed his eyes and accepted his fate without sound. Kale didn't flee. He'd existed for over 200 years. He'd witnessed civilizations ascend and crumble. He'd negotiated peace between species locked in centuries-long conflicts. He understood with absolute clarity that this marked the end of everything the Assembly represented. But he also knew something else. He pushed through the pandemonium, moving opposite the stream of panicking envoys. Energy fire scorched the atmosphere around him. A bolt grazed his wing, burning through plumage and tissue. He dismissed the agony. There was something critical he needed to do. He reached the hall's perimeter and pressed himself against the barrier, temporarily protected by an overturned podium. His talons moved to his forearm, to the modest device fastened there. A gift, a symbol of friendship from a species the Assembly had judged too underdeveloped to join. General Marcus Blackwood of Earth had presented it to him after their final meeting. A meaningful exchange, genuine, optimistic. "If you ever require assistance," Blackwood had said, "this will contact us anywhere in the galaxy. It's not sophisticated, but it's a guarantee." Kale had worn it constantly since. His clawed digits found the activation mechanism. The device was primitive by galactic measures. No encoding, no quantum linking, just a basic radio transmitter broadcasting on an ancient Earth wavelength. He pressed the mechanism. A small indicator illuminated green. The transmission began pulsing. Kale looked upward. A Scarvan warrior loomed over him, energy rifle targeted at his chest. The creature's jaws separated, exposing rows of jagged fangs. Its amber eyes revealed nothing, no malice, no pleasure, no compassion, only function. "You are too late," Kale whispered. "Someone will answer." The warrior fired. Kale's form collapsed against the barrier, smoke rising from the wound in his torso. His eyes dimmed, his feathered crown fell motionless. But on his forearm, The small green indicator continued blinking. The transmission continued pulsing. The slaughter lasted 11 minutes. When silence returned, the assembly hall was still. Bodies scattered across the floor. Envoys, guards, personnel. The air hung thick with smoke and the metallic scent of alien blood. 37 civilizations, 4,000 years of unity, concluded in less time than brewing coffee. The main entrance opened once more. Supreme Commander Valorak Skarn entered. He was colossal, 2 meters of battle-scarred, scaled flesh. His hide displayed marks from 100 victories, old injuries healed into proud ridges of tissue. His tail dragged behind him, powerful enough to pulverize bone. His amber eyes surveyed the carnage with the detachment of a predator examining a successful kill. He walked to the hall's center. His soldiers parted before him, heads lowered respectfully. He stopped beside the corpse of the assembly's chief negotiator, a small, delicate being that had devoted its existence to advocating harmony. Valorak Skarn placed one massive foot on the corpse's chest. "This," he rumbled, his voice like stones grinding together, "is what cooperation earns you." He looked toward the observation platforms where recording equipment still flickered with power. His jaws parted in what resembled a grin. "I am Valorak Skarn. For 10,000 years my people observed from beyond your territories. We watched you grow complacent. We watched you forget what power means." He pressed downward, bones fractured beneath his foot. "The Skarvan Dominion does not negotiate. We do not integrate. We do not compromise." His tail swept across the floor, scattering bodies like discarded objects. "There is no more assembly. There is only dominance. Submit or be eliminated." He turned and strode toward the exit. His soldiers fell in formation behind him, their footsteps resonating through the silent chamber. Behind them, amid the destruction and the smoke and the cooling corpses, a small green indicator continued blinking on a deceased envoy's wrist. The transmission pulsed onward. 12 hours later, across the galaxy, a solar event concluded. Earth's communication networks restored functionality sequentially. Satellites rebooted. Ground installations reconnected. The blackout that had isolated the Sol system for half a rotation lifted like mist evaporating under dawn. In the mountains of New Mexico, the SETI array awakened. Dr. Emil Vasquez noticed first. He'd been analyzing data archives when the anomaly manifested, a weak signal buried in interference, barely distinguishable from cosmic noise. He processed it through filters twice, then a third time. The signal persisted. "That's impossible," he muttered. He contacted his supervisor. His supervisor contacted the director. The director contacted someone in Washington, who contacted someone at the Pentagon, who contacted someone who understood exactly what they were observing. The signal wasn't alien. It was human. An obsolete Earth military frequency, emergency band. The type integrated into survival equipment and diplomatic packages. Basic analog, designed to transmit across any distance through any disruption. But the signal wasn't originating from Earth. It was transmitting from the galactic core. General Marcus Blackwood arrived at the facility 3 hours after the alert. He was 61 years old, a career officer who'd served in conflicts most citizens had forgotten. His face bore lines from decades of difficult choices. His eyes showed fatigue but remained alert. He listened to the signal extensively. The technicians observed him, awaiting instructions, awaiting explanation. Blackwood said nothing. He recognized that frequency. He'd authorized it himself years prior for a diplomatic package intended for a specific recipient, a gift for a friend, a promise. "Kale." The signal wasn't a distress call. There was no voice, no data, just a pulse, steady, unending. A beacon designed to activate only if everything else had collapsed. Blackwood understood what that silence meant. Whatever had occurred, Cale hadn't survived long enough to clarify. No secondary transmission, no explanation, just the beacon transmitting into emptiness. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. And in his final moments, Cale had done the only thing remaining. He'd reached out to Earth. Blackwood turned from the console. His staff waited for him to speak. "Sir," someone asked, "what are our orders?" "Discover what happened," Blackwood said. "Every monitoring station, every relay we can access, any fragment of data the flare didn't destroy. I want answers." He walked toward the exit, paused, looked back. "And establish a secure line to the Joint Chiefs. Encrypted channel, no leaks." The room erupted into activity. The answers arrived in fragments. Over the following 72 hours, Earth's intelligence apparatus worked continuously. Monitoring posts scattered throughout the outer settlements detected pieces of transmissions, deep space relays, some damaged by the flare, others simply too distant to receive clear signals, gradually fed information back to Earth. The picture that formed was worse than anyone anticipated. The Galactic Assembly had fallen, not destabilized, not fractured, fallen completely, violently, in a single coordinated assault. Intercepted communications revealed a grim reality. Emergency calls from dozens of species, most terminated mid-broadcast. Automated distress signals from stations that no longer responded. And underlying it all, a single message broadcasting on every frequency the galaxy had utilized. The Scarvan Dominion had announced itself. Blackwood stood in the Pentagon's secure briefing chamber, surrounded by admirals, generals, and intelligence directors. The display before them showed the translated message. The words hung in the atmosphere like toxin. "I am Valorak Skarn. The Assembly is extinct. The Scarvan Dominion commands. All species will comply. All opposition will be annihilated. You have no confederates. You have no hope. You have only one option, kneel or be erased." Silence filled the chamber. Admiral Hendricks, a Navy veteran with 40 years of service, spoke first. "Who the hell are these things?" "Unknown," replied Director Simmons of Naval Intelligence. "We have zero records of the Scarvan in any Assembly database we've accessed. No contact, no observations, no references. It's as if they didn't exist until 3 days ago." "They existed," Blackwood said quietly. "They were just waiting." He stepped closer to the display. The message repeated. Valorak Skarn's grinding voice filled the chamber. "Play the visual," Blackwood ordered. The display shifted. Grainy footage recovered from a damaged relay near the galactic core showed the attack's aftermath. The orbital hub, its hull compromised in dozens of locations, bodies drifting in vacuum, Scarvan warships circling like predators around Carrion. And there in the frame's center, the assembly hall, its great viewports shattered, its floors stained with blood. "Freeze there," Blackwood said. The image stopped. He walked closer, studying the devastation. His eyes found something near the frame's edge. A body slumped against a barrier, feathered crown pressed flat against an avian skull, a small device on its forearm still blinking. "Cale." Blackwood stared at the image extensively. No one in the chamber spoke. "He activated the beacon," Blackwood said finally. He turned to face the assembled commanders. Cale didn't have time to explain what was happening. He only knew something had gone terribly wrong, and when he needed someone he trusted, he reached out to the one place he could. He walked to the table's head. His voice was steady, but something cold had settled behind his eyes. "The Scarvan believe the galaxy is theirs now. They believe they've already won. They don't know about us. Earth was never inducted. We're not in their records." He placed both hands on the table. "But in 6 months, maybe less, they'll arrive here. They'll expect another easy conquest, another species to kneel." He met the eyes of the officers surrounding the table. "We won't give them that." Admiral Hendricks leaned forward. "What are you proposing, General?" Blackwood straightened. "Full mobilization. Every shipyard, every weapons platform, every soldier we have. We activate the Aegis grid. We bring Longbow Station to full operational status. We build a fleet, and we train it to eliminate these things." "Are we prepared for a conflict of that scale?" Simmons asked. Blackwood didn't hesitate. "We don't get to choose that. They're coming eventually. The only question is whether we meet them prepared or on our knees." He turned back to the display. The frozen image of Cale's body stared back at him. A friend, a diplomat, a believer in peace. Dead now because peace had failed. He walked toward the exit, paused, looked back one final time. "Get me everything we have on the Scarvin. Ship designs, weapon signatures, tactical patterns, anything our monitoring posts have captured. I want to know how they fight." "And then," Hendricks asked. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "And then we teach them how we fight." He left the chamber. Behind him, the message from Valorak Skarn continued looping. The Supreme Commander's voice echoed through the empty briefing room, promising extinction to all who resisted. Somewhere in the static, buried beneath the threats and declarations of conquest, a small human signal still pulsed from the orbital hub's ruins. A beacon from a dead friend. A promise Earth intended to keep. 6 months later, the Scarvin arrived at Sol. Their armada emerged from the void like a wound tearing open in space. Black vessels, angular, jagged silhouettes resembling predators frozen in metal. They numbered in the hundreds, dreadnoughts, carriers, assault cruisers, arranged in perfect formation as they crossed the system's outer boundary. At the armada's head, the largest vessel of all, the Scale Throne, Valorak Skarn's flagship, a mobile fortress bristling with energy lances and gravity weapons, its hull scarred from 100 conquests. The Scarvin had come to claim another world. On the bridge of the Scale Throne, Valorak Skarn stood before the observation viewport, his massive form silhouetted against the distant yellow star. His amber eyes studied the system before him. 8 planets, a scattering of moons, one world teeming with life. Earth. His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Korvax, approached with a tactical display. "Supreme Commander, we're detecting orbital structures around the 3rd planet, primitive construction, no energy shields, no plasma signatures." Valorak Skarn's jaws parted slightly, amusement. "Primitives," he rumbled. "The Assembly's records mentioned this species. They were denied membership, too young, too weak." "They weren't on the subjugation list," Korvax noted. "Then they'll learn submission firsthand." Valorak turned from the viewport. "Open a channel, all frequencies. Let them hear the voice of their new masters." The communication array activated. Valorak's message broadcast across the Sol system, drowning out every frequency, every signal, every transmission. "Species of the 3rd planet, I am Valorak Skarn, Supreme Commander. The Scarvan Dominion has claimed this galaxy. Your assembly is ash. Your allies are corpses. You stand alone." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You have one opportunity. Kneel before the Dominion. Surrender your world, accept your place as servants, resist, and you will cease to exist. You have 1 hour to respond." The message ended. Silence followed. The Scarvan fleet held position, waiting. Valorak Skarn returned to his command throne, settling his massive form into the ancient seat. His tail coiled around the base. His claws tapped against the armrest with patient rhythm. 1 hour. More than enough time for primitives to realize their situation, to understand the futility of resistance, to beg for mercy. The minutes passed. Korvax monitored the communication arrays. His crest twitched with growing unease. Supreme Commander, there's no response. They're afraid, give them time. More minutes. The tactical display showed no movement from the human orbital structures, no transmissions, no distress signals, no pleas for negotiation. Nothing. Korvax's unease deepened. Supreme Commander, still no response. No communication of any kind, they're simply silent. Valorek Skarn's eyes narrowed. This wasn't fear. Fear produced panic, chaos, desperate attempts at communication. Scan their orbital platforms again, he ordered. Korvax complied. The results appeared on the tactical display. His scales paled. Supreme Commander, the orbital structures, they're not stations. Explain. They're weapons. 12 platforms arranged in a ring around the planet. Electromagnetic accelerators, kinetic projectile systems. There. The first railgun slug hit the Skarvan Vanguard at 18 km/s. It struck the lead destroyer without warning. A tungsten rod the size of a transport vehicle, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by the Aegis grid's magnetic rails. The destroyer's shields flared, held for a fraction of a second, then collapsed. The slug punched through the hull from bow to stern, exiting in a spray of molten metal and venting atmosphere. The ship died instantly. Then the rest of the grid opened fire. 12 platforms, 48 railgun batteries, all firing in synchronized sequence, pouring kinetic death into the Skarvan formation. Slugs tore through shields that had never faced this kind of sustained bombardment. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds found themselves shredded by simple metal moving at impossible speed. Valorek Skarn surged to his feet. Return fire. The Skarvan fleet responded. Energy lances lit the void, sending searing bolts toward the orbital platforms. Gravity weapons activated, warping space in lethal patterns. The counterattack was massive, overwhelming, exactly as it had been against every other species they'd conquered. But the Aegis grid had been built by humans. And humans had learned long ago that shields could be drained, that energy weapons could be dodged, that the simplest weapons were often the most effective. The platforms were armored, not shielded, thick layers of tungsten and ceramic composite, no energy signature to target, no shields to collapse. The Skarvan energy lances hit them and scorched their surfaces, but the platforms kept firing. And firing. And firing. On the bridge of the UEDC Carthage, General Marcus Blackwood watched the battle unfold. The flagship hung in formation with the rest of the human fleet, 47 vessels arranged in 3 battle groups behind the protection of the Aegis grid. The Carthage was a heavy carrier, bristling with fighter bays and torpedo tubes. Around it, destroyers and frigates held position, waiting for the order to advance. Blackwood stood at the central command console, his face illuminated by the tactical display. 6 months of preparation, 6 months of building, training, planning. All for this moment. Aegis Grid reports nominal function, his tactical officer announced. Enemy Vanguard has lost 14 ships. They're attempting to reform. Longbow status. Primed and ready, awaiting your order. Blackwood nodded. The longbow stations on Luna were the second phase. Kinetic launch platforms designed to hurl massive tungsten rods across the void. Ship killers, each one capable of cracking a dreadnought in half. Hold longbow in reserve. Let them commit their fleet first. Yes, sir. On the display, the Skarvan formation was shifting. They'd recovered from the initial shock and were pushing forward, their dreadnoughts forming a wall of shields and firepower. Energy lances hammered at the Aegis grid. One platform took a direct hit from a gravity weapon, its structure twisting and crumpling before it exploded. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship. On screen. Valorak Skarn's face appeared on the main display. His amber eyes burned with fury. His jaws were parted, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "Humans," he spoke the word like a curse. "You dare to strike at the Dominion. You dare to resist." Blackwood looked at the screen. His expression didn't change. "You have made a mistake," Valorak continued. "A fatal one. I have conquered 100 species, burned 1,000 worlds. You are nothing, insects. I will tear your fleet apart and feast on your ashes." The transmission waited for a response. Blackwood reached out and terminated the channel. "Helm," he said calmly, "signal the fleet all ahead full, hammer formation." The UEDC Carthage surged forward. Behind it, the entire human fleet followed. Destroyers, frigates, cruisers, all advancing in a wedge formation with the flagship at its center. The UEDC ironclad took point, its assault batteries already charging. The two fleets closed the distance, and the real battle began. The void between Earth and the Skarvan Armada became a killing field. Railgun slugs and energy lances crossed in the darkness. Ships on both sides died, some quickly, torn apart by kinetic impacts, others slowly, burning from internal fires as atmosphere vented into space. The Carthage shuddered as an energy bolt grazed its port armor, scorching a black scar across the hull. Blackwood gripped the command console, but didn't flinch. "Damage report. Port armor section 7 compromised. No hull breach. Damage control teams responding. Keep firing, target their carriers." The human fleet was smaller, outgunned in raw firepower. But they had advantages the Skarvan hadn't anticipated. Speed, human ships were faster, more maneuverable. They dodged energy lances that would have hit slower vessels. They slipped through gravity weapon fields that should have torn them apart. Coordination. Every human ship operated as part of a single tactical network, sharing targeting data in real time. When one ship fired, 3 others adjusted their aim to compensate. The Skarvan fought as individuals, the humans fought as one. And most importantly, they had studied their enemy. 6 months of intercepted transmissions. 6 months of analyzing Skarvan tactics, weapons, shield frequencies. 6 months of learning exactly how to kill them. "Enemy shields are weakening on the forward dreadnoughts," the tactical officer reported. "Sustained fire is draining their power reserves faster than they can compensate. Concentrate fire on the lead ship, all batteries." The ironclad acknowledged the order. Its main guns pivoted, locked onto the lead Skarvan dreadnought and opened fire. 4 railgun slugs hit the ship in rapid succession. The first collapsed the shields, the second breached the hull, the third and fourth tore through the interior, shredding crew quarters and engineering sections. The dreadnought listed, trailing fire and debris. Then it exploded. A cheer went up across the human fleet, but Blackwood silenced it with a raised hand. "Stay focused, this isn't over." He was right. On the scale throne, Valorak Skarn watched the destruction of his dreadnought with cold fury. These primitives, these insects, they were actually fighting back, actually killing his ships. "Unacceptable. Launch the boarding swarms," he ordered. "All carriers, overwhelm them with numbers, take their ships from within." Across the Skarvan fleet, carrier bays opened. Thousands of boarding pods launched into the void, each one carrying a squad of Skarvan soldiers. They streaked toward the human formation like a cloud of metal locusts, aiming for the gaps in the defensive fire. The Carthage's sensors screamed warnings. Multiple inbound contacts, boarding pods, hundreds of them. Blackwood's jaw tightened. This was the Skarvan's preferred tactic. Breach the hull, flood the corridors with soldiers, take the ship through brutal close-quarters combat. All ships defensive fire, point defense batteries full auto, do not let them attach. Guns across the fleet swiveled, filling the void with streams of tracer fire. Boarding pods exploded by the dozens. But there were too many. Some slipped through. They hit the hulls of human ships with magnetic clamps, their cutting torches already burning through armor. On the destroyer UEDC Relentless, the first Scarvan soldiers breached the hull. They came through in a wave too, 8 meters of scaled muscle and armored hide, energy rifles barking, claws slashing. The human crew met them in the corridors with everything they had. Sergeant Major Darnell Vickers was the first to fire. His rifle bucked against his shoulder, putting 3 rounds into the chest of the lead Scarvan. The creature staggered but didn't fall. Its scales absorbed the impacts like armor. It raised its energy rifle and fired back. Vickers dove behind a bulkhead as the bolt scorched past him. "Armor-piercing rounds," he shouted. "Aim for the joints, the throat." His squad adjusted. The next volley targeted the gaps in the Scarvan's natural armor, the softer scales at the elbows, knees, neck. Soldiers fell, but more kept coming. The corridor became a slaughterhouse. Across the fleet, similar battles raged. Humans and Scarvan fought hand-to-hand in the tight confines of ship corridors. The Scarvan were larger, stronger, harder to kill. But the humans were fighting for their home, their planet, their species. They didn't retreat. On the Carthage, Blackwood received the reports with grim focus. Boarding parties on Relentless, Indomitable, and Fury's Edge. All ships reporting heavy resistance. Tell them to hold. Reinforcements. Reinforcements are not available. Tell them to hold. The words were hard, but Blackwood knew the truth. If he diverted ships to rescue boarded vessels, the formation would break. And if the formation broke, the Scarvan would win. "Sir," the communications officer looked up. "Message from Colonel Venn. Sigma Division reports ready." Blackwood paused. This was the moment, the plan they trained for, the gamble that could end this battle or doom them all. Status of the Black Horizon. In position, stealth systems active, undetected by enemy sensors. Blackwood looked at the tactical display. The scale throne sat at the center of the Scarvan formation, protected by a wall of escorts. Its shields were at full power. Its weapons were devastating anything that came close. But every ship had a weakness. Signal Colonel Venn. Operation Blackout is authorized. Disable that flagship. Yes, sir. On the UEDC Black Horizon, Colonel Derek Venn received the order. He stood in the stealth carrier's launch bay, surrounded by his team, 4 operators, the best Sigma Division had. Each one had trained for this mission specifically. Each one knew they might not come back. Venn's scarred face showed no emotion as he addressed them. "You heard the order. We breach the scale throne. We find their shield generator. We disable it. Then we get out and let the fleet do the rest." Sergeant Brent Kowalski checked his shotgun, a custom weapon he called Whisper. "And if we can't get out, then we make sure the shields go down anyway." Corporal Yusuf Smith finished syncing his tactical computer. "I've got their ship schematics. Shield generator should be in the lower engineering section. Heavy guard presence." Corporal Alexei Marov said nothing. He simply checked his rifle scope, his face blank. Private First Class Tomas Reyes loaded the last of his breaching charges. "How many Scarvan between us and the target?" "Unknown, assume hundreds." Reyes nodded. "Good, I brought extra charges." Venn almost smiled. "Load up. Stealth pods launch in 60 seconds. The team moved to their pods, small single-occupant vessels designed for covert insertion. No weapons, no shields, just speed and a sensor-absorbing hull. They would launch from Black Horizon, drift through the battle undetected, and attach to the scale throne before the Scarvan even knew they were coming. That was the theory. Venn climbed into his pod, the hatch sealed. The launch countdown began. Around him, the battle raged. Human ships and Scarvan vessels tore each other apart in the void. The Aegis grid continued to fire, its platforms now reduced to 9. The Carthage traded broadsides with a Scarvan cruiser, both ships bleeding fire and debris. Everything hung in the balance. The countdown reached 0. The stealth pods launched. 5 metal coffins shot into the darkness, invisible to sensors, threading through the crossfire toward the enemy flagship. Ven watched through his pod's tiny viewport as energy lances and railgun slugs crisscrossed the void around him. A Scarvan destroyer exploded less than a kilometer away. The shockwave rocked his pod but didn't breach it. He kept his breathing steady, focused on the mission. The scale throne grew larger in his viewport, massive, terrifying, a predator frozen in metal, its hull scarred from 100 battles. His pod's computer chimed. 30 seconds to contact. Ven activated his tactical display. The other 4 pods were on course, no detection warnings. The Scarvan had no idea they were coming. 20 seconds. He checked his weapons: rifle, sidearm, combat knife, grenades. 10 seconds. The scale throne filled his entire viewport now. Its hull was a wall of dark metal pitted with weapon ports and sensor arrays. 5 seconds. He braced himself. Impact. The pod hit the hull with a magnetic clamp, attaching silently to the surface. Ven felt the jolt but didn't move. Outside, the cutting torch activated, burning through the enemy armor in a controlled ring. 30 seconds later, the breach was complete. Ven dropped through the hole and into the scale throne. The interior was exactly as intelligence had predicted: hot, humid, dimly lit in shades of red and amber. The air smelled of ozone and something reptilian, a musk that clung to the walls and floor. His team dropped in behind him. Kowalski, Smith, Marov, Reyes, all accounted for. Ven signaled silently. Move out. They advanced through the corridor, weapons raised. The ship hummed around them. Engines, life support, the deep pulse of the shield generator drawing power from the main reactor. Somewhere above, Valorak Skarn commanded his fleet, unaware that humans were already inside his ship. That was about to change. Ven checked his tactical display. The shield generator was 4 decks down, through crew quarters, through security checkpoints, through whatever the Scarvan threw at them. He looked at his team. 4 operators against a ship full of monsters. He moved forward. Behind him, the battle for Earth continued. The first Scarvan guard died without knowing what killed him. Marov's rifle coughed once, suppressed, precise. The round punched through the gap between the creature's helmet and neck scales. It dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, energy rifle clattering against the metal deck. Ven signaled the team forward. They moved through the scale throne in tactical formation. Ven on point, Kowalski behind him, whisper ready, Smith in the middle, eyes on his tactical display, Marov covering their 6. Reyes carried the breaching charges, his demolition pack heavy against his back. 4 decks to go. The ship's interior was a nightmare of alien design, corridors twisted at odd angles. The walls were lined with conduits that pulsed with a sickly amber light. The air was thick, humid, at least 40 degrees C. Sweat soaked through their tactical gear within minutes. Ven pushed forward. He trained for this. They all had. 6 months of studying intercepted schematics. 6 months of drilling in mock-ups built to Scarvan specifications. Now they'd find out if it was enough. They descended a service ladder to the next deck. More corridors, more heat. The hum of the shield generator grew louder, a deep resonant pulse that vibrated through the deck plates. Smith checked his display. 2 decks remaining. Shield generator is in the central engineering bay. Large compartment, multiple access points. Guard presence, Ven asked. Unknown. But if I were them, I'd have at least 30 soldiers protecting their most critical system. Assume 50, Ven said. Plan accordingly. They kept moving. The next Scarvan patrol appeared around a corner without warning. 4 soldiers, armored, armed. Their amber eyes widened as they registered the human intruders. Kowalski was faster. Whisper roared, a sound that was anything but quiet. The custom shotgun was loaded with tungsten flechette rounds, designed specifically to punch through Scarvan scales. The first soldier caught the blast in the chest and went down hard. Kowalski racked the slide and fired again. The second soldier's head disappeared in a spray of dark blood. The other 2 opened fire. Energy bolts scorched the air. Then Dove left, returning fire with his rifle. Marov put a round through one soldier's eye. Reyes threw himself against the wall as a bolt missed him by centimeters, close enough to singe his sleeve. The last soldier charged. It was fast, terrifyingly fast for something so large. It crossed the distance in 2 strides, jaws open, claws extended. It slammed into Kowalski before he could bring Whisper up. They hit the deck together. The Scarvan's claws raked across Kowalski's chest armor, gouging deep furrows in the ceramic plate. Its jaws snapped at his throat. Kowalski jammed his forearm into the creature's mouth, feeling teeth scrape against his armored bracer. Ven pressed his pistol against the Scarvan's skull and fired twice. The creature went limp. Kowalski shoved the corpse aside, breathing hard. Blood seeped from where the claws had breached his armor, but the wounds were shallow. "You good?" Ven asked. "I'll live." Kowalski retrieved Whisper from the deck, "but I'm going to need a new vest after this. Add it to the requisition list." They kept going. 1 deck to go. On the bridge of the Scale Throne, Korvax received the report. Supreme Commander. He approached Valorak Skarn's command throne, his crest tight against his skull. "We have a problem." Valorak Skarn didn't turn from the viewport. Outside, the battle raged. Human ships and Scarvan vessels tore each other apart in the void. The primitives were fighting harder than expected, dying harder. But they were still dying. "Speak," Valorak rumbled. Intruders inside the ship. A patrol failed to report. Security sensors detected weapons fire on Deck 7. Now Valorak Skarn turned. His amber eyes narrowed. "Intruders here on my ship." "Yes, Supreme Commander. A small team. They appear to be moving toward the engineering section." Valorak rose from his throne. His full height 2 meters of scarred, scaled fury seemed to fill the bridge. His tail lashed against the deck, cracking the metal plating. "The shield generator." "Yes, Supreme Commander. They're moving toward engineering." Valorak Skarn's jaws parted, revealing rows of serrated teeth. A sound emerged from his throat, something between a growl and a laugh. "Bold for primitives." He stepped toward Korvax. "Take a kill team. Find them. Bring me their heads. I want to see what species dares to board the Scale Throne." Korvax bowed his head. "It will be done, Supreme Commander." He turned and strode off the bridge, already summoning his best soldiers, 12 warriors, veterans of 100 boarding actions. They would find these intruders, and they would make them regret ever setting foot on this ship. Sigma Division reached the engineering deck. The corridor opened into a massive chamber, the heart of the Scale Throne. At its center, the shield generator rose like a pillar of dark metal and pulsing energy. Conduits snaked from its base in every direction, feeding power to emitters throughout the ship. The air hummed with barely contained force. Between Sigma and the generator stood 40 Scarvan soldiers. They were arranged in defensive positions throughout the chamber, behind consoles, on elevated walkways, clustered around the generator itself. Their weapons were raised and ready. They'd been expecting company. Ven assessed the situation in 2 seconds. Marov elevated position left walkway, suppress their flanks. Kowalski raise with me, we push center. Smith, find me a way to disable their backup power. I don't want those shields coming back online after we blow the generator. On it. Smith was already moving, slipping along the chamber's edge toward a control terminal. Marov climbed. His rifle was an extension of his body. He found a position behind a support strut, sighted down the scope and began picking off targets. One shot, one kill. Then another. And another. The Scarvan returned fire. Energy bolts filled the air. Ven led the charge down the center, using overturned equipment as cover. Kowalski was beside him, whisper thundering with each shot. Rays followed, the demolition pack bouncing against his back as he ran. They fought through the first line of defenders. Then the second. Bodies fell, Scarvan soldiers crumpling under concentrated fire, but more kept coming. The chamber was too large, too many angles, too many enemies. An energy bolt caught Kowalski in the shoulder. He spun, hit the deck, but kept firing from his back. Blood soaked through his armor. Kowalski. Ven grabbed him, dragging him behind a console. I'm fine, keep going. Kowalski's face was pale, but his grip on Whisper never wavered. Get raised to that generator, I'll cover you. Ven hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. Hold this position, don't die. Not planning on it. Ven and Rays pushed forward. Marov's rifle cracked overhead, dropping Scarvan soldiers before they could flank. Smith's voice came through the comm. Backup power system located. I can disable it, but I need 60 seconds. You have 30, Ven replied. They reached the base of the shield generator. Rays was already pulling charges from his pack, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He slapped the first charge against the generator's primary conduit. Then the second. Then the third. 15 seconds to arm, he said. Then we run. Ven turned to cover him and found himself face to face with Korvax. The Scarvan second-in-command had entered the chamber through a side passage, his kill team fanning out behind him. He was massive, nearly as large as Valorak Skarn himself. His scales bore the marks of countless battles. His amber eyes locked onto Ven with predatory focus. Human, Korvax rumbled. You should not have come here. Ven raised his rifle. Neither should you. He fired. Korvax moved faster than anything that size had a right to move. He dodged the burst, closed the distance in 2 strides, and swung his tail in a vicious arc. Ven dove under the strike, rolled, came up firing. Rounds sparked off Korvax's chest armor. The Scarvan laughed, a deep grinding sound. Your weapons cannot hurt me, primitive. He lunged forward, claws extended. Ven sidestepped, drove his combat knife into the gap between Korvax's arm and torso. The blade sank deep, dark blood welled around the wound. Korvax roared. His fist caught Ven in the chest, sending him flying backward into a console. Something cracked, ribs probably. Pain exploded through his body. Done, Rays finished arming the charges. We need to go. Korvax turned toward him, jaws parting. Ven drew his pistol and shot Korvax in the eye. The Scarvan screamed, a sound that shook the chamber. He staggered, clawing at his ruined eye socket, blood pouring down his face. Ven was already moving, grabbing Rays by the arm, pulling him toward the exit. Smith, backup power. Disabled, go. Marov, Kowalski, fall back. Marov dropped from his position, sprinting toward the exit. Kowalski rose from behind his console, firing Whisper with one hand while clutching his wounded shoulder with the other. The team converged at the chamber's main entrance. Behind them, Korvax recovered enough to bellow orders. Stop them, kill them all. Scarvan soldiers surged forward. Rays hit the detonator. The charges exploded. The shield generator tore itself apart in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. The explosion ripped through the engineering bay, consuming soldiers and equipment alike. The shockwave threw Sigma Division through the doorway and into the corridor beyond. For a moment, everything was heat and noise and chaos. Then silence. Ven pushed himself up. His ears were ringing, his ribs screamed in protest. But he was alive. Sound off status. Marav functional. Smith minor burns operational. Rays, I think I lost an eyebrow, otherwise good. Silence. Kowalski. Ven turned. Kowalski lay against the corridor wall, whisper still clutched in his hands. His eyes were open, his chest was still. A piece of shrapnel had found the gap in his armor. It had pierced his throat. Ven stared at him for a moment. Then he reached down and closed Kowalski's eyes. Sigma lead to Carthage. Shield generator destroyed. 1 KIA. Recommend immediate fire mission on enemy flagship. Blackwood's voice came through, steady and calm. Confirmed Sigma lead. Longbow is firing, get to extraction. On the bridge of the UEDC Carthage, Blackwood watched the tactical display. The Scale Throne's shield signature had vanished. The flagship was defenseless. Longbow Station, you are cleared to fire. On the surface of Luna, 6 kinetic launch platforms activated. Magnetic rails charged, targeting computers locked onto the coordinates transmitted by the Carthage. They fired. Tungsten rods, each one the size of a telephone pole, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. They crossed the distance between Luna and the Scale Throne in seconds. The first rod hit the flagship amidships. It punched through the hull like a needle through paper, exiting on the other side in a spray of molten metal. The second rod hit 3 decks above, shredding the command section. The third struck the engine block. The Scale Throne began to break apart. On the bridge, Valorak Skarn felt his ship dying around him. Explosions rocked the deck. Conduits burst. Crew members were thrown from their stations as gravity fluctuated wildly. He stood at the viewport, watching his fleet fall into disarray. Without his coordination, without his commands, the Scarvan armada was fragmenting. Ships collided with each other. Formation broke. The Primitives' railguns tore into them with renewed fury. This couldn't be happening. He was the supreme commander. He'd never lost. He'd never retreated. He'd conquered 100 species, burned 1,000 worlds. He couldn't fall to these insects. Another impact shook the ship. The viewport cracked. Atmosphere began to vent. Valorak Skarn turned from the dying stars. His amber eyes found Korvax staggering onto the bridge, one eye a ruined socket, blood coating half his face. Supreme Commander, Korvax gasped. The ship is lost. We must evacuate. Valorak Skarn said nothing. He looked at the viewport one last time, at the human fleet advancing, at his armada breaking, at the world he'd come to conquer now staring back at him in defiance. The Dominion does not retreat, he said quietly. The final longbow rod hit the bridge. Valorak Skarn ceased to exist. The battle ended not with a roar, but with silence. The Scarvan fleet, what remained of it, scattered. Some ships attempted to flee toward the outer system. Human destroyers ran them down. Others tried to surrender, broadcasting on all frequencies. The Carthage didn't respond. Railguns spoke instead. By the time the last Scarvan vessel was reduced to debris, the Sol system was quiet again. Wreckage drifted through the void, the remains of ships from both sides. The Aegis grid, reduced to 7 platforms, fell silent. The guns cooled. On the UEDC Carthage, General Marcus Blackwood stood at the viewport of his bridge. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The weight of command had carved new lines into his face. Behind him, his crew worked in exhausted silence, cataloging damage, coordinating rescue operations, counting the dead. There were many to count. 14 human ships destroyed, 6 more crippled beyond repair, over 3,000 personnel killed in action. The Relentless had been lost with all hands when its reactor breached during the boarding action. The Indomitable had survived, but barely. Its corridors were still being cleared of Scarvan corpses. A victory, but a costly one. Commander Torres approached. Sir, Sigma Division has been recovered, 4 survivors, 1 KIA Kowalski. Colonel Venn is requesting permission to debrief. Later, let him rest. Blackwood paused. Let them all rest. Torres nodded and withdrew. Blackwood remained at the viewport. The stars stared back at him, cold and indifferent. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the system, the Scarvan Dominion still existed. This fleet had been a vanguard, a conquering force sent to claim a primitive world. There would be more. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, Earth had survived. A communications officer approached. Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the outer colonies. They're asking what happened. What do we tell them? Blackwood was silent for a moment. What could he tell them? That the galaxy had collapsed while they slept, that an empire of predators had come for them, that thousands had died to buy Earth a single day. Tell them the truth, he said at last. Tell them we were attacked, tell them we won, and tell them to prepare because this isn't over. The officer nodded and moved away. Blackwood turned back to the viewport. His reflection stared back at him, an old man in uniform, carrying a weight that would only grow heavier with time. Torres stepped beside him and held out a data pad. Colonel Venn submitted this before he went to medical. He said you'd want to see it. Blackwood took the data pad. The image filled the screen. Footage from Venn's helmet cam, captured during the firefight in the engineering bay. A Scarvan soldier lay slumped against a console. Clutched in its clawed hand, half melted by energy fire, was a small device. A human device. Blackwood recognized it instantly. The emergency beacon, the one he'd given to Kale years ago. One of the Scarvan had taken it from Kale's body, a trophy, salvage, something meaningless to them. They'd carried it aboard the scale throne, without knowing what it was or what it meant. Now it was nothing but melted slag on a dead ship. Blackwood studied the image for a moment. Then he handed the data pad back. Archive it, he said. Flag it as recovered enemy material. Torres nodded and stepped away. Blackwood remained at the viewport. Beyond the glass, the wreckage of the Scarvan fleet drifted in silence among the stars. Broken hulls, cooling metal, the remains of a force that had come to claim Earth and failed. The Scarvan had expected submission. They'd found resistance. And somewhere in the debris of the scale throne, tumbling among the dead and the ruined steel, a melted piece of human technology spun slowly through the void. It would never transmit again. It didn't need to. Its message had already been received.